The Law and You, a look at laws in St. Vincent and the Grenadines which affect our daily lives. The Law and You, presented by lawyer panel P.R Campbell QC and brought to you on SVG-TV as a public service.
Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, boys and girls, greetings. Welcome to another presentation in this public service nation building series, The Law and You. This is program number 988. Coming to you on Monday, the 2nd of November, 2020. On this program, I will speak to you on the topic 3 legal election questions answered. But before getting into the topic, a few preliminary matters, beginning as usual with condolences going out from me to all families which have suffered recent bereavements, and in that connection the family of the late Mrs. Salitha Davy of Carapan, who was up to her death a client of mine. Condolences especially to her husband Alec and her brother-in-law Mr. G. Michael Davy, another client of mine. Secondly, sorry, let me clear my throat. This being the last Law and You program before the general elections to be held on Thursday, the 5th of this month, this week Thursday, I would like to take the opportunity to say thanks on behalf of the nation to several persons. Firstly, 2 retiring members of Parliament. I refer to the Honorable Annie Eustace and Honorable Sir Louis Straker. Those gentlemen have served long stints in our Parliament, and the nation should give them its thanks for the services they rendered in their respective capacities. In that connection, let me say thanks as well to all the new candidates who are offering themselves for the first time to the electorate. Many people don't recognize what courage it takes for someone to live your normal, peaceful, quiet, happy life and say you're going to become a candidate for a political party. You expose yourself and all your family to all manner of evil talk. I mean, in our politics, where winner takes all, we sometimes descend into the gutters at election time. And it takes a courage, particularly for women. And as I understand the situation, we'll have 1, 2, 3 women offering themselves for the first time. 4, in fact. One in North Windward, 1 in East St. George, 1 in West St. George, and 1 in South Leeward. To those 4 ladies, I say thank you for the courage you have shown in coming forward, and I wish you all the very best. I have been in the political arena for a long time, and I know what it is. When people don't cuss you to your face, your spouses get it, your children get it, your family get it, and people talk what they know about you and what they don't know. But coming forward to offer yourselves for service to the nation is a gesture of patriotism and nobility, and I, for one, applaud all four of you ladies coming forward for the first time. Of course, there's a fifth lady on the in the hustings, but she ran already, Mr. Senator Charles. But four new ladies coming forward, and I appeal to the public. Don't get up there and trace these ladies and say insulting things to them. They're simply offering themselves to serve the nation, to serve us. And they should be applauded for their courage. And when the elections are over, win, lose, or draw, we should say thank you to them for having come forward. So, on behalf of the nation, I am thanking you ladies for offering yourselves as candidates for your respective political parties. Excuse me. Now, I spoke about Dr. Cyrus's book 2 programs ago, and I apologize I was not able to come on the air last week, Monday. I was really under the weather. And I did tell you I would let you know where the book is going to be available. Well, the book is going to be available at Games Bookstore and from Dr. Cyrus himself at Botanic Gardens. He ran out of the first lot, which they got, but they are expecting some more this week. So he should have copies, and Games Bookshop should have copies. As I said, a delightful book which I commend to all Vincentians, from one of our most illustrious sons of the soil. All right, final preliminary comment. Yesterday, St. Vincent and the Grenadines became the president of the Security Council of the United Nations. The presidency rotates every month between the members of the council, and our turn began yesterday, the 1st of November, for 1 year. A press conference was slated to be delivered by the Honorable Prime Minister virtually. I was not able to hear it, but I am sure that all will have gone well. Now, I don't know if we still have digested the enormous achievement it has been for St. Vincent and the Grenadines to have become a non-permanent member of the United Nations Security Council. It means we are right at the top of world governance. It's a remarkable achievement for which I congratulate the government yet again. All Vincentians, regardless of which side of the political fence you are, should appreciate that signal achievement and that honor which has been bestowed on our country, and all the very best to our ambassador at the United Nations and all the other personnel who are assisting her in the discharge of her duties. The eyes of the world will literally be on St. Vincent and the Grenadines for the month of November. It's remarkable. All right, well, we get into the topic for the day. 3 legal election questions answered. And I have written them down. The first one, is the Prime Minister still the Prime Minister? Secondly, Can the government extend the hours of voting? And thirdly, was it right to have made the teacher resign? That is the teacher who is contesting, the female teacher contesting in North Winwood. So the rest of this program I will devote to answering these three questions from the point of view of the law as I understand it. First question, is the Prime Minister still the Prime Minister? Well, in our system, the answer is yes. Never mind Parliament has been dissolved, the government of the country still continues and will continue until another Prime Minister or is sworn in or the same one is sworn in again. So Parliament being dissolved doesn't mean, as I heard one person on the platform allege, that the Governor General ought to be running St. Vincent and Grenadines. No, that is not the way the system operates. Still have a government. And if, for example, St. Vincent should find itself at war tomorrow, or if there should be a calamitous event, like an insurrection, mass riots, Parliament could be recalled, even the Parliament that has been dissolved, and the former members of Parliament could be recalled for a special sitting of the House. So yes, the Prime Minister is still the Prime Minister, and indeed, if you have a copy of the Constitution and you look at section 57, subsection 1, you will read this. The Governor General, acting in accordance with the advice of the Prime Minister, may appoint parliamentary secretaries from among the members of the House to assist ministers in the performance of their duties, provided that, and this is what I want you to understand and listen to, if occasion arises for making an appointment while Parliament is dissolved, a person who was a representative or a senator immediately before the dissolution may be appointed as parliamentary secretary. So the Prime Minister could have a cabinet reshuffle tomorrow and change a minister from one ministry to the other because the ministers are still in office and he, the Prime Minister, is still in office. But after elections, when somebody goes up to be sworn in as Prime Minister, whether it is Dr. Gonsalves who goes up to be resworn as Prime Minister, or whether it is Dr. Friday who goes up to be sworn as Prime Minister, until that time, the existing government continues legally to be in office. For in our system, there can be no gap. There can be no time when there is a total vacuum and there's nobody in power or nobody in authority. So I hope that answers that question and puts all argumentation to rest. Second question, can they extend the voting hours? Again, the answer is yes. Now, voting hours are prescribed by Rule 14, Sub-Rule 2 of the election rules. Where is 14.2? Come on, 14.2, where are you? Ah, yes, there you are. Rule 14 reads as follows. Poll to be taken by ballot. Sub-rule 1. The votes at the polls shall be given by ballot. The result shall be ascertained by counting the votes given to each candidate, and the candidate to whom the majority of votes have been given shall be declared to have been elected. Sub-rule 2. The poll shall commence at 7 a.m. and kept open until 5 p.m. and no longer. Well, as the rule stands, right now, polling has to finish at 5. And you know there's a practice where a person who arrives at the polling station on time, that is a minute before 5, and joins any line that he or she finds waiting, or persons waiting to vote, has to be allowed to vote. So what normally happens is that at 5 o'clock, the policeman on duty would go out. If there's a long line outside the polling station at 5 o'clock, the policeman will go and stand at the end of the line. He'd look at his watch, make sure it's 5 o'clock. And anybody arriving after the Prime Minister has stood there can't vote. They'll be too late. But as long as that line is, the Prime Minister has to stand, the policeman has to stand at the end of it, and everybody in the line who arrived at the vicinity of the polling station before 5 o'clock has to be allowed to vote. So if the last person reaches in at 6 o'clock, they have to be allowed to vote even though it's after 5 because they were in the line at 5 o'clock. But if you show up there 2 minutes past 5, 3 minutes past 5, and you find the policeman standing there, don't think you're going to make noise and say, oh, you had a puncture, or this and that happened and so on, you couldn't get there. You're either in the line when the policeman gets at the end of it, or you're not. If you're not in the line, then it's akka, baka, soda, water, out goes you. All right. Now, so the present, at this, as I speak, the rule is that the polls close at 5. Now, what prompted this question, a number of people asked me this question, is an announcement made by the authorities that they're going to allow COVID positive people, or people, who are in quarantine, to vote after 5. And some people say, oh, well, they can't vote after 5. Well, Cabinet can change that, and I do believe that by an extraordinary issue of the Gazette, sometime tomorrow or Wednesday, the Cabinet will issue an amendment to that rule, because the Representation of the People Act, that is the Act of Parliament, says in section 33(1), the proceedings at an election shall be conducted in accordance with such rules as may be made by Cabinet. So in our system, election rules are to be made by Cabinet, but we have continued along the line of using the old-time election rules, which came into force even before there was such a thing as Cabinet. But at any time, Cabinet could modify them, because there's a general rule of law that a rule-making authority has the power to modify a rule, which it has the power to make. So you can make rules, you can modify rules. So what I do believe will happen is that Cabinet will make an amendment to permit voting after 5 for those who are in quarantine, and it shouldn't be a lot of persons. They would vote at their respective station. But remember, anybody arriving in St. Vincent and Grenadines after Saturday, that is Saturday the 31st of October, will not be able to vote. No matter how much your name is on the list, how much ID card you have, once you came here after Saturday, so from Sunday morning onwards, you can't vote. Certainly not at these elections on the 5th of November. All right. So that deals with question 2, can they extend the voting hours? Question 3 will occupy a little more time, because this is a vexed question on which I disagree with the government in what they have done. And I'll tell you why I disagree with the position that the government has taken. Now, in our system, governments are supposed to abide by the rulings of the court. And where the court has made a clear ruling on a disputed matter involving a government, that ruling has to be respected and obeyed by the government. And in my respectful opinion, the government has not obeyed the ruling made by the Court of Appeal in a case which I'm going to quote to you. I'm not going to ask you to rely on my word. If you have a computer, you do a Google search of the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court. Look at the website, then you'll find the heading Judgments. And on the judgment, look for a case, Elvis Daniel, Addison Thomas, Kenroy Thomas, Oswald Robinson versus the Public Service Commission and the Attorney General. A decision was handed down by the Court of Appeal on the 29th of January last year, dealing with a situation in which 3 teachers, well, let me read it for you. And I may ask the authorities to permit me tonight to go over the allotted time by 2 or 3 minutes, because after all, I wouldn't get a chance to say this before elections again. So please, bear with me. I'll read you what the case says, and if you go on the computer and you read the case, this is what you will read yourself. On the 3rd of November 2005, the government of St. Vincent and Grenadines and the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Teachers Union entered into a collective agreement. Article 16 of the collective agreement provided for a no-pay leave of absence of up to 6 months for certain union members to contest elections. The first 3 appellants, Elvis Daniel, Addison Thomas, and Kenroy Johnson, the appellants, were teachers in the public service of St. Vincent and the Grenadines and were also union members. They sought to engage Article 16 by applying for leave to contest the general elections held in St. Vincent and the Grenadines on the 13th December 2010. The application addressed to the Chief Personnel Officer of the Public Service Commission, who replied by letter drawing the appellant's attention to Section 26(1)(d) of the Constitution of St. Vincent and Grenadines, which provides that no person shall be qualified to be elected as a representative if he holds or is acting in any public office. At the time of the application, the appellants were holding a public office. Having failed to obtain election leave, the appellants resigned their posts as teachers and unsuccessfully contested the general elections. They wrote to the CPO seeking reinstatement to their posts. The CPO replied indicating that there was no vacancy to which the appellants could have been appointed. The appellants, by fixed date claim sought various declarations, including a declaration that Article 16 does not offend Section 26(1)(d) of the Constitution. The appellants also sought an order for reinstatement and damages for loss suffered for breach of their constitutional rights. The learned judge struck out the case. The judge found inter alia that the import of Section 26 of the Constitution was to prohibit those who continue to be public officers from offering themselves as candidates for political office while they remain public officers. The appellants, being dissatisfied with the decision of the learned judge, appealed. The grounds of appeal raised the following issues for the court's determination. 1. Whether Article 16 of the collective agreement offends, the word is ultra-virus, but I would use the common word offends, Section 26(1)(d) of the Constitution. 2. Whether Article 16 gave rise to a legitimate expectation. 3. Whether the respondents acted in bad faith in refusing the appellant's leave for the purpose of contesting the general election. And 4. Whether the respondents breached the appellant's constitutional right of protection of property. Held. This is the decision of the Court of Appeal. Allowing the appeal. In other words, the Court of Appeal overruled the judge and held in favor of the three teachers. 1. Article 16 of the collective agreement does not and cannot qualify a public service, in this case a teacher, to be elected as a representative given the provisions of Section 26(1)(d). It only addressed leave to contest election. To successfully challenge Article 16 on the ground that it violates Section 26(1), it must be shown that there was something in its provision that qualified the appellants to be so elected. Article 16 is therefore not ultra vires Section 26(1) of the Constitution. In other words, Article 16 does not violate the Constitution. 2. The principle of legitimate expectation is based on the proposition that when a public body states that it will do something, a person who has reasonably relied on that statement should, in the absence of good reasons, be entitled to rely on the statement and enforce it through the courts. The terms of Article 16 are clear, unambiguous, and devoid of relevant qualification, and certainly engendered a legitimate expectation on the part of the appellants. In other words, the court is saying, if the government made a promise, it should keep that promise. I will skip the other holdings and go down to 5. The appellant's property rights violation argument concern pension benefits. Pension benefits are amenable to protection as property rights under Section 6. Once the appellants are entitled to pension benefits in the absence of some lawful basis for its deprivation, in respect of which none has been advanced in this case, the appellants are entitled not only to a declaration that their property right guaranteed by Section 6 of the Constitution has been breached, but an assessment of damages for that breach, as a mere declaration would not be adequate given the nature of the breach. And I should mention that the holding in 3 said the courts have no power to force the government to take somebody back, but the courts have power to order the government to pay them compensation for the rights which would have been violated by forcing them to resign, as it were. Now, since this is the case, when the case of Miss John in North Windward came up, And the lady, who is a qualified teacher, applied for leave the same way that these three appellants had applied. The government should have been guided by what the Court of Appeals said, namely that they made a promise and they have to keep it. And if they don't and the person is forced to resign, then the government has to pay compensation. So that if the lady is unsuccessful in the election, and if her party is unsuccessful in their bid to become the new government, and she applies to get back a job, and the government refuses, they will have to pay her compensation the same way the Court of Appeal ordered the government to pay compensation to these three teachers. And I understand that sadly, since the teachers ran in 2010, they have not been paid the money that the court ordered them to pay, but I'm not sure if the assessment process has been finished. So that I come back to what I said in answer to the question, was it right to have made the teacher resign? No, it was not right. It was not right because the Court of Appeal said it was wrong. And if the Court of Appeal says something in relation to one scenario, and then another scenario arises which is indistinguishable from the first one, a government has a duty to follow what the Court of Appeal has ruled. There are no ifs and buts about it. And this is not a matter of friendship of this answer, it's a matter of legal principle. But the elections would decide a lot of questions. Well, my brothers and sisters, that is all from this program of The Law and You. I would only urge you to conduct yourselves within the law between now and voting and even after voting. Don't get excited and don't get into trouble because of the results. The results might be controversial in one or two cases, but let the law take its course. I hope everybody will exercise their democratic right to vote for a candidate of their choice, and I hope nobody will hinder anybody from supporting the candidate or party of that person's choice. Let us hope the good Lord will continue to guide us here in this land of the blessed, so that even as we are at the pinnacle of the world, so to speak, in the United Nations, other countries could look and say, yes, that is a democratic country, and we did right to elect them to a place in the United Nations Security Council as a non-permanent member. Let us hold St. Vincent and the Grenadines in high esteem. But we could only do that if we conduct ourselves in accordance with the law. So that is all from this program of The Law and You. I look forward to being of further service to you next week, Monday, DV, when, of course, I would probably comment on the election results. Until then, do have a peaceful, thoughtful, contemplative time, a restful time, a prayerful time, and may the good Lord continue to bless us all.
The Law and You, a look at laws in St. Vincent and the Grenadines which affect our daily lives. The Law and You, presented by lawyer panel P.R Campbell QC and brought to you on SVG-TV as a public service.